Hey, what do you see as, maybe a few of the latest trends, being the roles that you play in the industry? What are some of the latest trends in this space?
I'll start. I mean, like one of the most common conversations that I have with CIOs and CISOs is how do we modernize security? Now, it used to be the conversation was, well, I'm on-prem. I have somewhere between a dozen and 40 security tools. What can I divest myself of and go with sort of what's built into the public cloud? The conversation still happens, but it's not as common. The more common conversation now is, how do I optimize what is built in, and how do I link it up with estates that I have in other public clouds, as well as on premises, to create sort of a wide hybrid footprint, because I want a really efficient security architecture that can give me singular views for compliance, singular views for enforcement, singular views for monitoring. So that is definitely a trend. And in fact, Oracle is one of the key members of ONA, where we're having that conversation with our fellow public cloud providers about how to create a common security notification framework.
I mean, resilience has just really, surfaced to the very top. I think the boards are really being active in terms of asking their CTOs and their CISOs, how are we really prepared for an attack? How are we truly going to remain, up and running to the amount that we need to be in order to survive? And I think some are going back and saying, okay, I probably need some help to identify truly what those critical business services are. Not every single organization knows exactly what are the top tier, the crown jewels that I have to make sure are up, and what are the number of hours that I have to make sure I'm recovered by. A lot of those gaps is what we're helping clients now to identify what their recovery capabilities look like, what are they missing, and then putting together the right program in place. That's been very, very relevant right now for obvious reasons. I would also say getting back to the tools, and I always smile at that because there are hundreds of security tools out there in the marketplace. There is no shortage. And oftentimes, right, organizations say, hey, let's just implement this tool and all of our problems are going to be solved. But there's truly no processes first in place to support it. And so I would also say and argue that a lot of organizations, yes, have these great tools, but they've implemented maybe half of them. I'll say half of the capability. It's not consistently applied across the organization. So they're scratching their heads saying, okay, where's the ROI that, Mr. Vendor, you sold me? I'm not seeing the benefit. And therefore, they're not really capitalizing on those cyber capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, Jamie, I agree with you 100%. And we're, one of the, if you think about the standard triangle, right, where it's like you got the products or the platforms, then you got the people and you got the process. And we already talked about the problem with there aren't enough people. And guess what happens when you don't have enough people? It's also, you don't have enough people to implement product or enough people to implement process. And so you kind of get into this kind of troublesome loop. And zero trust is an example of one of the main trends that are occurring. And at its core, it gets back to, and both Johnnie and Jamie mentioned it, if you're waiting for an alert, you're probably too late. So recognizing the fact that we should just go, look, I'm going to assess your identity and determine, and the device's identity, and I'm going to assess the risk of the environment you're in. And on the fly, I'm going to make a decision what resources I'm going to give you access to. That automating of the process, it's not perfect, but it's accounting for the reality of the fact, even pre-pandemic, that most of the computing resources and the things were outside of the protected corporate firewall DMZs that we had for so long, that you have to account for it. So doing these decisions on the fly, as opposed to locking them in and then seeing, oh, something happened, we find the alert out months later, kind of go all the way back. trying to streamline and shorten that with some automation is definitely a major trend as well.
Yeah, for sure. And with regard to all of this tooling, yeah, I mean, Jamie said hundreds. Come on, it's more like thousands. Which is one of the reasons I think public cloud is doing a great service to companies and organizations trying to unify their security views. Cloud security posture management is one of those areas that into which things like threat detection are folded in, vulnerability scanning are folded in, configuration management, configuration drift control are folded in. It certainly is in our case. Every major cloud provider has it. And as I mentioned, a lot of us are coming together to sort of create connective tissue between these things. So what that means for users of the public cloud is finally, you're never going to get to the sort of the single management console screen, but unified risk views that are prescriptive in how you can go dial down risk versus sort of combing through tons and tons of alerts and detail as a knowledgeable someone to figure out where to reduce your risk, right? That world is going away. More prescriptive, more automated things rolling up into, centralized posture management. At least with cloud, we're able to do that. That is something that is good news.
Jamie, you mentioned that resiliency was something that your clients and customers are asking about. What are, be interested, what are some of the other questions that customers are asking about?
I think our clients are, want to be top of mind when it comes to new regulations that they're trying to meet out there. I know, doing business in China and the China cybersecurity law is one of the ones that constantly comes up. India is looking for their new data protection bill to get signed. That's going to have, another set of requirements that a lot of our clients are going to need to look at. And then, also there's a lot in terms of, organizations doing work with the federal government. So getting up to speed and getting their CMMC compliance certification is also one of the things that a lot of our clients are really working on. And I think there's also, potentially other countries, close to us that are going to start adopting, CMMC as well. So getting our clients prepared, doing readiness assessments for them are one of the key things that they've been asking a lot lately.
Jamie, have they, how important has the privacy thing been? GDPR, CCPA,
Yeah.
That's one of the things that even when we talk about, the risks of some of these attacks, privacy just continues to raise its importance. And even again, on the BYOD side of things, when people are, whether it's a laptop or whether it's a tablet, it's like it's mine. So you need to protect my privacy. But have GDPR and CCPA and that sort of thing been relevant to your clients?
Definitely. And I would say, again, because I see a ton of it from an M&A space, when our clients are looking to help us do their cyber due diligence on the target, honing in on the data security, the data protection, understanding, does the target have a data classification policy? Do they really understand the importance of, data loss prevention and how that is so important to the organization? And I would also say when it comes to, quote unquote, being a target, right? Once the deal is announced, imagine, these hacker groups out there that get wind of this, and then those two entities, those two companies become a target. And then I would also say what's really important is your insider threat program. That can really stem some elements within your insider threat issues that can occur where you may have a disgruntled employee do something. And so the need of DLP becomes critical to understand, am I going to be able to identify and detect if there is, data exfiltration out of my environment because of the environment that you're in, because you're going through a transaction. So those are a lot of things that I help my clients kind of, walk through those scenarios with them and try to reduce the risk there as much as possible.
Now, for the folks listening to us too, I'm just going to contextualize it or sum it up, but statistics show that the time of merger and acquisition, or shortly after the announcement of a merger and acquisition, is when threats against the participating companies tend to be the most elevated, and a lot of successful breaches have been associated with that. So, and Jaime clearly knows those statistics very well and has had to live them with clients probably. And data loss prevention is definitely sort of core tech to ensuring that security intense, high value information isn't leaving through applications or unwarranted access. But also what we see regarding data privacy and data protection is a lot of our clients, at least on the IS side, is potential or would be or current tenants of the cloud, geofencing their data. Where is my data? Can my data leave a region? Can my data inadvertently go, motion to another region without my say so? Those are very common questions we get, and of course, in our case, data stays at the region that the tenant has selected. But these are valid questions. Where is my data going when it's being accessed by an application? Where is it being processed? All of these things are relevant to GDPR. Other privacy regs and just privacy in general. But at least the homogeneity of a public cloud platform allows the kind of visibility into where your data is that you don't necessarily have on premises. So I think, Jaime, you mentioned that you're doing assessments. I'd imagine that part of it is helping clients understand even where they have data, right? That is important and needs to be protected, or its access needs to be governed, monitored.
Well, this is awesome. So what are, maybe if we were to come up between us, like what are some of the tips, maybe 3 tips that we would give to companies, and how they should measure the effectiveness of their policies and how they should think about benchmarking against others in the industry?
I mean, measuring effectiveness, immediately when I hear that, I think, the only way to measure is to test. So looking at, a cybersecurity assessment across your 12 cyber domain areas and understanding, the security components I have in place, the controls I have in place. If you're not out there truly testing them, then you're not going to be able to determine your operating effectiveness. And I would say when it comes to benchmarking and looking at other organizations within your industry, performing a cyber maturity assessment will give you that maturity score, depending on what type of platform, framework, and tool that you're using. You'll be able to understand your score as it compares to other organizations in your industry. And it's a really good means to look at in terms of understanding all of my different cyber domain areas. Where am I falling short compared to others in my industry? Where actually am I ahead of other folks in our industry? And it really gives you that sense of, where do I hone in on to move that needle, to the right, to be more mature. So those are 2 things that I think are no-brainers in terms of you're never going to know how to measure effectiveness unless you truly go out there and test it. A lot of clients have their business continuity plan, their crisis management plan, but you have to ask, okay, when is the last time you actually tested it? A lot of clients are doing war gaming to test, what really happens and are we well coordinated in that crisis mode? And again, you have to test in order to prove it.
What's nice about a maturity assessment program like the one that Jaime's talking about, that Deloitte does, it doesn't just focus on tech. It's also looking at whether your processes are mature. And so you see a holistic opportunity to transform and move up that maturity curve. It's not just, you're missing these 5 tools. It's very much a 360 view.
I think one of the things that we've seen, so we actually have a maturity model for mobile security that includes a mobile security index. So Jaime was talking about it holistically within each one of the kind of stacks. I think another part is saying, okay, well, how do you compare against your peers, and how do you compare against benchmarks, by vertical, by geography, by size, et cetera. And I think it's very helpful to do that. But what is required to do that is, first, you're going to have to be willing to anonymously have your data benchmarked as well. I mean, this is, again, I think, being part of the environment, right? And I think the other part is just having a broad enough base where you're saying, okay, if I'm only comparing against two, it doesn't matter. You need to compare against enough that to make it statistically valid along the lines of what Jamie was talking about. The other thing, though, that we've seen is not all metrics are created equally. I think based on your company's strategy, policy, risk posture, all of that, what metrics matter most need to be accounted for most. And having somebody like Deloitte that knows which levers matter more than less has got to be really important in that, because you don't know until you've gone through it, right?
Sure. Well, I'll round this out with, I'll be a little bit more prescriptive, I think, and forgive me, maybe even tactical, but for those listening that have responsibility for securing their tenancies in the public cloud, you probably know that all of us CSPs publish our best practices called benchmarks with the Center for Internet Security, or CIS. So you go there, you can download them. In our case, what we've done with Oracle Cloud is we've actually automated the process of implementing those benchmarks or best security best practices, and even provide scripting for checking compliance over time to make sure that those settings haven't drifted. So that's just something, like a go do, or maybe you have folks that you can sort of, task to go action on that. But, more broadly to Jamie's earlier point, there is probably capability that you could be taking advantage of right now, since public cloud providers are constantly on a continuous release cycle, right? CI/CD. So you probably don't know all of the ways in which you could be shoring up your defenses and hardening your tenancy and improving your data resilience. And
whether you do it either by connecting with us or folks on my team, or really organizations like Deloitte that can help you kind of understand.
That range is, that would be, I guess, my go-to.
Tell us what you think. Rate the episode at oracle.com/trending topics.